Welcome back to TADHack Global 2017 here based in Brisbane. QUT, hosted by QUT, Foundry and Oracle. I'm here with Marisa from 0 Day Solutions just to have a chat around cybersecurity and everything security related to application development. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, nice to be here.
So just a basic intro that I've been asking everyone, what is 0 Day Solutions and where is your focus?
So we're a really new company, I suppose. So for the past year or so, we've been focusing on security research specifically. So we essentially did bug bounties where we tried to find bugs in popular software, and then you sell that information and it eventually gets patched. After doing that for long enough, we kind of had enough money to self-fund the business and start looking into other things. We do a lot of defensive work now. That's the main area of research. So using that sort of offensive security research knowledge, we try and help people avoid that, avoid making the mistakes that we found often. So at the moment we do things like penetration tests. The biggest thing that I want to move into, and what I think is more important for long-term security, is actually education of developers and system administrators. So ideally, in a typical penetration test, you get an engagement with a penetration tester, and what they'll do is they'll try and find the bugs in your application. They'll give you a report saying, here are the bugs we found, and you fix those reports. But the root cause of what actually caused that bugs is never fixed in that regard. Yep. I think we tend to make the same mistakes as developers over and over again, and it's not really developers' fault because they don't understand what those mistakes are, because it's not really in a normal computer science curriculum, particularly in Brisbane, as far as I know. When you learn how to program, you don't learn how to program defensively. That's a skill that you have to learn. So what we try and do is we go in and we engage with the client and we say, here are the problems that you tend to make, and let's try and teach your developers how that happens, and let's sort of role play in a way and start your developers thinking about how attackers actually think, so that when they write their code in the future, they're actually thinking with the attacker's mind. When they're doing code review, they think with an attacker's mind and they stop those problems before they actually happen. So we're really pushing into education, because I think that is going to be the real solution long-term for businesses and for security in general, is that everyone cares about it, and it's not a specialist job, it's the job of everyone involved in a business. Well,
this is where I see a lot of things from a traditional, so I come from a traditional comp science background, yep. And I'm definitely one of those people that going through uni, it was all about the syntax, it was all about the function that you write, and then ultimately from working for Oracle and corporate software, then it's more about the business function more so than security, or even some of the other, what they classify non-functional or non-business functional aspects.
Yeah.
And then on the tail end, then you think about performance, you think about security and the like. So I love that you're trying to bring, as part of the whole thing around DevOps and SecOps, in terms of actually bringing security, bringing that development methodology back into the front end of that process, yep. To the point of security as well as how you execute is actually part of the business model, yep. As the organization. Is fantastic that you're actually doing that. So that's quite a bit of a journey in terms of that broad spectrum. And looking at corporate software, there's lots of different types of applications being built. So do you see that being any different, whether you're writing software for websites versus mobile versus, we had Ty from Trumbull Unmanned talking about drones. Do you see anything a bit different depending on where those things are deployed?
Yeah, so really when you're developing, say you're a web developer, you should kind of look at the common mistakes that web developers make. I think what people don't realize is that we've made all of these mistakes over and over and over again. I think a big example is most people have heard about SQL injection, and they think that we don't do that anymore because it's so well known that why would you ever write something like that? And there was I think a year or so ago, Drupal, which is one of the biggest CMS platforms, had an SQL injection within it. So something that everyone used that assumed was sort of immune to these sort of problems still had that problem in it. So you need to go into any sort of development you do depending on what you're programming. So say you're programming a web application, you should know what XSS is, you should know what SQL injection is, you should know what command injection is, and you should have that in your mind when you develop. But in saying that, I think what people tend to learn. If you go and you learn how to attack something, so you do some, they're called war games, where people give you a fake thing, then you try and hack it. What you're actually learning is a way of thinking about user input that's really mistrustful, and that can sort of go beyond your domain-specific problem. So an example I do is I started with binary exploitation, which is actually, if you write C, you can make mistakes with memory management that actually can turn into code execution, essentially. So it's a very sort of different sort of bug that you have when you're running a web application, but the way you think about it is kind of the same. An attacker will look at where the user input is and start thinking, so what are the things that the programmer didn't think about? You're expecting the user to do a certain sort of input, and then the attacker goes, okay, well, they're expecting me to put a string in here. What if I put a really long number? What if I put a bunch of random non-printable characters in it? Anything that can cause unexpected behavior could be a security vulnerability. So I think if you learn how to hack a website, that can actually then transfer, that same sort of way of thinking about things can transfer to other domains. But there are specific problems that come up over and over again in web application security, for example, and they're sort of different to the problems that come up if you're a C programmer. You should learn about what those problems commonly are, but also just learn about that way of thinking. Start just being really suspicious and don't expect your users to do what you think they're going to do. And that requires sort of a reframing of the way you think, but I think that's why teaching people how to attack stuff is really, really useful.
So as part of this event, we've got a lot of people outside there that are actually not hacking away from a security aspect, but building solutions in a quick time frame. A lot of it's actually to do with programmable technologies, programmable APIs against telecoms. So I assume that because we are making these applications quite open and very easy to consume, that the security threat and security concerns that we should look at will be even quite broader.
Yeah. One thing is that you mentioned that you have to try and get it out really quickly, and quick is sort of the enemy of security in a way. I know that we kind of have a problem when you try and add as many features as possible, and I know, again, like as I said before, when you're an attacker, you learn how to look at applications and try and figure out where to hack them. And one of the biggest places that you try and hack things is sort of weird features that not many people use. So example might be that you make this cool application and you have this sort of strange feature on the side that maybe 1 or 2 people use, but you want to keep it for some reason. That code isn't really looked at anymore, and a lot of people don't want to remove features from their products, but sometimes if no one's using that feature, you should remove that feature. And in that way, simple and slow is kind of the best way to make security products, which is kind of the enemy of what people sort of do in this agile development thing. But you just have to be careful. And I would say that you make a better application if you're careful too. So when it comes to a hackathon event, like go as quick as possible, get a product out there. But when you get to the phase of like, okay, now I'm going to announce this and put it on the internet is a war zone, and you have to be aware that like, even if you don't want it to be a war zone, it is. You put something on the internet and someone will throw a brick through your window if they can. That's how it is. So once it goes on the internet, you need to kind of do that due diligence and think about security. At least do the basics, like try and keep everything up to date. That's the big one that's been hitting everyone, and it's like the first rule of security is keep stuff up to date so that there aren't known vulnerabilities that people can hack. So I don't know if like telecoms is particularly more vulnerable than other applications. It depends on how complex the application is, and it depends on how quickly people are pushing it. But when it comes to hackathons, do it as quickly as possible, but when releasing, just be a bit diligent,
So the diligence aspect to me also puts priority from a business angle. So the business needs to see that there is value in actually spending time and effort on security and making sure that they're not just things that IT do, but things that the business should be concerned about as well.
Yeah, that's, I think the biggest problem for like a business like mine is convincing people that security is worth caring about, because when it comes to rapidly developing application features, you can be like, well, I developed this feature and it has this many users, and you can sort of put a monetary value on the value that you added. in general, and this isn't just with computers, it's with everything, there's so many heroes in the world who have prevented something that we don't know that they're heroes because that actuality never eventuated. So someone who has figured out that there was an SQL vulnerability in their software and patched it, they're not really going to get celebrated, but if they got hacked and you fixed it after you got hacked, you would be like, congratulations to that person for like helping our business. So it's really difficult to kind of evaluate that on a business perspective. It is an area of risk management and risk evaluation, and a lot of people, especially small businesses, they find difficulty in putting a monetary value when they've only got a limited amount of resources to actually put that into security. So I do see that perspective. My argument against that is it's going to start happening more and more. We're sort of in this new age where a lot of people, when I started learning about this, didn't know anything about computer security. You wouldn't really understand how stuff gets hacked. Nowadays, there's things like ransomware where there's now like a really immediate monetary value for people from overseas to hack you, and you don't have any recourse when someone from overseas hacks you. So we're in a stage where it's kind of getting worse, it's getting more obvious, and even customers are starting to care now. So that's something I've actually heard about, where businesses approach us for security help because their customers care. Their customers want to know, what are you doing to protect my data? Because it's the customer's data that gets, it's the customers that get affected when you get hacked. And if you have all of your information leaked online, that can be devastating to a business. So I would consider it as any sort of risk. Like, we buy insurance to make sure, if you're a consultant, you buy insurance to make sure you don't accidentally destroy a company. And I think cyber insurance is going to become a big thing in the next 10 years or so. That's going to be the new thing, that if you want to make sure that you have you are able to fix things if things get hacked, you can get cyber insurance for that. And the cyber insurance, what they'll probably do is you'll get lower premiums if you do your due diligence. So at least then there will be this monetary aspect that pushes people forward to be like, okay, let's make it as secure as possible so we don't have to pay as much for cyber insurance. I know that regulations are starting to happen in Europe. That's starting to happen in Australia too, where it's sort of now pushing forward mandatory data breach notification laws. And if you think about that, that means that you actually have to know now if you've been hacked. And most people don't know for months and months and months that they've been hacked. Europe has the same thing. It's starting to legislate now, where you have to show due diligence if you've been hacked, or you can get sued. So the governments are starting to come in now. So there is now a monetary reason for you to care about security beyond just like, you should care because you should care about your customers' data.
So, wow.
That was a long rant, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I have a lot of thoughts about this.
It is part of the business, and it's part of the thing that part of the passion that you build the business on. So it's great that you actually provide that that insight to that, because it's not necessarily something that we do talk about. And as an example, part of this hackathon around telecom app dev, we're very much focused on the building of these applications and integrating stuff, but part of the conversations that we're having here is, let's talk about the other things that people don't talk about, like security. We've got Dr. Mann coming up soon, talking about the law aspect. So she's from School of Justice, and Dr. Rema talking about net neutrality in terms of the commercialization around the internet. They're things that people don't talk about, but they are relevant within this ecosystem that we are talking about, especially when we've got these cloud services providing voice, chat, SMS type technologies, bringing all that together. We've got to be concerned about those things, because that's part of the reality. So one of the things that we sort of raised before with Ty, just that was on before, was around the surveillance side. So they do a lot of things with drones. There's the security angle around the communications side. Then it's not just the code we write, but the infrastructure that we run on. So is that something that you look at too? Or is that part of the overall arching managing that security layer? So
there's two aspects to security. One is like, you try not to write the bug so it never happens. I think a more practical aspect of security is you kind of have to accept that bugs will always happen. You want to make it as annoying as possible for an attacker to find a bug, so you want to get those really easy ones. But the reality is sort of like a really, really intense attacker will probably find a bug. So after that, you have to plan your infrastructure in a way that any sort of attack is contained and that they can't access information. And that is sort of the infrastructure side of it. So we have the separation between developers and operations, and developers and system administrations and network architects. All of them have to know about security, and it's a different aspect of security they have to know about. So your network architects, or in the cloud, they handle the hardware and the switches and stuff, but you still need to design your firewalls around containment. So the idea is that a lot of people, when setting up a server or something, they'll just open up all the firewall ports because it's sort of easier. They don't have to have the problem where, like, I don't know why my application isn't working. Oh, it's because the firewall, so let's open that up. That sort of laziness is how things start to build up. The idea is every time you have sort of something that is exposed to users, that users can access, that is an entry point for an attacker, and you have to decide, if this node got attacked, what information would they have, and how do we contain that? So it is a different area of security, but it's still important, which is why I'm trying to advocate that it's not just security professionals that need to know this stuff. It has to be everyone. Everyone has to be on board, because it's sort of one weak point can be catastrophic. So it's a difficult area.
Yeah, when we're talking about even just part of this, there's so many different products in that can come together. So things on your mobile phone, talking to one of our sponsors, cloud services, and then they are communicating with potentially a drone or a fridge at someone's house, and there's a lot more home devices that are actually getting connected up that you can remotely connect. So it becomes almost, when you're talking about that, it's not just your product.
Yeah.
It's the whole ecosystem that you have that is the weakest link in, and then what paths do you take to the other pieces of infrastructure?
And that's why it does, especially with Internet of Things, it does get really, really difficult. We have this problem where there is no real recourse if someone releases a faulty Internet of Things device and it gets hacked. And Internet of Things has been used already for big attacks, so they'll have really, really basic security vulnerabilities, and they're all used and linked together to try and take something down. That's already happening. It's probably going to happen more, which is why it's like, what my business wants to do, it's almost like a call to arms. Like, this is really serious. We already have a problem with there not being enough security professionals. We need everyone to realize that this is really important, because it's our personal information at stake. Another big thing is that you talked about, like, everything has data now, and the technology is moving faster than security can catch up, because we're really excited to store all of this data. We want to store data so quickly. We don't know what we're going to do with the data, but we want to have the data. In a security perspective, if I was to advise someone, be like, don't keep data you don't need, because any data that you have is something that can be stolen. But it's sort of, you have the security people kind of screaming like, don't keep that data if you don't need to, whereas business wants to move forward and keep the data because, like, we don't know what we want to do with the data. It might give us some sort of business inside information about, like, what our clients are doing. That's a hard argument to win on the security side. I still don't know what the answer to that is. Like, personally, I think don't keep data that you're not going to use at all.
Yep.
The less data you have, the less attractive you are as a target. People can't steal what you're not holding.
Yeah.
But that's tough.
That's
my argument compared to someone who might say, well, it makes us money. So.
Yeah. So it is. There is an argument there, and I think at the end of the day, there needs to be. We talked about risk. We talked about what the business needs in terms of meeting their market, in terms of what their customers need. There's also the aspect around that cultural change in the organisation, that security is not just that person's role. So similar to some of the things that we're talking about here, in just having a great idea or being part of a hackathon, you don't necessarily, that idea could come from anywhere. So the responsibility to look at the idea, look at the way that you do it, the way that you secure it, the way that you operate it, it becomes it's a role that everyone should play, and not just someone that in IT and specifically in security, specifically in global and risk assurance should think about. It's actually everyone's responsibility. So.
And I would argue also for, like, developers watching this, that it's really fun to try and hack stuff. There's lots of war games online that you can play. and it will make you a better programmer. It generally will, because generally when you learn about secure programming, you learn how things get hacked, you're constantly thinking about edge cases. And that actually just makes your program more robust, right? Having proper error codes instead of like error 500 when something weird happens. When you try and attack systems and you see things that aren't, like exceptions that aren't caught properly, you're like, ooh, that's something the developer hasn't thought about. So learn to attack things. It's way more fun than you think it is. It's way easier than you think it is too, and you will be a better developer for it. And as much as I can like bemoan the fact that a lot of people don't care, the best thing I think that we can do and people watching this can do is care about your own business and try and convince other people to care, and that's the difference that you can make. You may not know that you've defended your company against attack, because that's not how it works, but you very well, just by changing that attitude, you very well may have saved your company from losing information.
And that's part of the education process.
That's part of the education process. Getting people excited about it, because it is fun.
So thank you, Marisa.
No
Thank you for actually sharing this couch with us. So
thank you for listening to my rants.
So thank you very much. Great to meet you. And we actually got Oracle Labs, who actually do research and development in the Oracle office, and part of what they do is about security analysis and code analysis. So happy to make an introduction there and awesome. Just and move forward. So cool. Thank you very much. I'll see you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, see you.
Up and